The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not the kind that comes after gunfire. Not the silence of exhaustion, when men stop speaking because there is nothing left to say. This silence felt wrong. It pressed against his ears. As if the world itself had stepped back, holding its breath. He stood alone in the middle of the road, boots half buried in old snow that had frozen and thawed too many times. The surface cracked under his weight with a dry, brittle sound that seemed too loud for such an empty place. No wind. No birds. No distant artillery. Nothing. He adjusted the strap of his rifle without looking down. His fingers moved automatically, stiff from the cold, the leather hard like wood. There should have been something. A signal flare. Smoke on the horizon. Even the faint echo of engines. Instead, the road stretched forward between skeletal trees, their branches black and thin, like ink scratches against a pale sky. He tried to remember the last time he heard another human voice. It slipped away from him. Like a dream that dissolves the moment you reach for it. His name was Mikhail, though no one had said it aloud in days. Maybe longer. Names don't last long out here. They fade first. Then faces. Then purpose. He began walking again. Each step slow. Measured. Not because he was cautious, but because there was no reason to hurry anymore. The village lay ahead. Or what remained of it. From a distance, it looked untouched. Roof still in place. Windows dark but intact. A thin layer of frost clung to everything, giving it a strange, preserved stillness. Too still. He stopped at the edge of the first house. The door was slightly open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open. A thin line of darkness inside. He listened. Nothing. He pushed it with the tip of his rifle. The wood creaked, long and low, like it hadn't moved in weeks. Inside, the air felt different. Stale. Not rotten. Just abandoned. A table stood near the center of the room. A cup rested on its side, frozen liquid spilled across the surface in a thin, glassy sheet. A chair had fallen backward. But not violently. More like someone stood up too quickly, and never came back. Mikhail stepped inside. His boots left faint marks in the frost-covered floor. He noticed them immediately. Because they were the only ones. No other footprints. No drag marks. No signs of struggle. Just stillness. An absence. He moved deeper into the house. A coat hung by the door. A child's shoe near the corner. The stove was cold. Completely cold. He reached out and touched it anyway. Stone. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been recent. But it hadn't been chaotic either. That was the part that unsettled him. War leaves noise behind. Broken glass. Spent shells. Walls torn apart. But here, it was as if the village had been quietly emptied. Like a room after a conversation ends. He stepped back outside. The cold hit him again, sharper now. Or maybe he just noticed it more. He looked down the narrow path between the houses. More doors slightly open. More windows staring outward like blind eyes. He didn't want to go further. But he did. Because standing still felt worse. The second house told the same story. A meal left unfinished. A blanket half folded. A lamp with no oil. No signs of panic. Just interruption. He moved faster now. From one house to the next. Each one identical in its silence. Each one whispering the same quiet question. Where did they go? And why so calmly? By the time he reached the center of the village, his breathing had changed. Shallow. Controlled. but uneven. There was a well. Frozen over. A rope hung stiff along its side. He touched it. It didn't move. Nothing here moved. Not even the air. That's when he saw it. Tracks. Faint. Almost gone beneath the frost. But there. Leading away from the village. A single line at first. Then more. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All heading in the same direction. No signs of return. Mikhail crouched down. His knees cracked softly. He traced one of the prints with his glove. Old. But not ancient. A few days, maybe. A week at most. Too organized to be panic. Too many to ignore. He stood slowly. His gaze followed the tracks toward the tree line beyond the village. The forest. Dark. Dense. Unwelcoming. The kind of place where sound disappears even on a normal day. He hesitated. For the first time since the silence began, he hesitated. Because the village, for all its emptiness, was still open. Visible. Understandable. The forest was something else. A place where things could hide. Or vanish completely. He looked back at the houses. At the empty windows. At the open doors that seemed to wait for someone who would never return. Staying here meant nothing. Moving forward meant something unknown. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Not out of readiness. But out of habit. Then he stepped toward the tracks. Each footprint felt like a question. Each step, an answer he wasn't ready to hear. The snow changed as he approached the trees. Softer. Less disturbed. As if the forest had already begun reclaiming what passed through it. The branches above blocked what little light remained. Shadows stretched long across the ground. The silence deepened. If that was even possible. He crossed into the forest. And immediately felt it. That same pressure from before. But stronger now. Closer. Like something unseen had noticed him. He stopped. Listened. Nothing. No wind through the branches. No creaking trunks. No distant roar. Just that heavy, unnatural stillness. He turned slightly, scanning between the trees. Shapes blurred together. Dark against darker. For a moment, he thought he saw movement. He raised the rifle. Waited. The shape didn't move again. Just a trick of the light. Or maybe not. He exhaled slowly. His breath formed a faint cloud, lingering longer than it should. Even the air felt reluctant to move. He continued forward. Step by step. Following the fading trail. Until the tracks began to scatter. Not disappear. Scatter. As if the people had slowed down here. Spread out. Hesitated. The ground showed it clearly. Footprints overlapping. Circling. Stopping. Something had happened here. He knew it before he fully saw it. A small clearing opened ahead. Bare. Exposed. The trees pulled back just enough to reveal a patch of earth where the snow was thinner. Disturbed. Mikhail stepped closer. Carefully. His boots pressing into the uneven surface. And then he saw the first object. A scarf. Left on the ground. Half frozen into the dirt. He crouched. Picked it up. Still intact. Still warm in color, despite the cold world around it. He looked around the clearing. More things. A glove. A bag. A broken lantern. Not scattered randomly. Dropped. One by one. As if people had let go. His chest tightened. Not from fear. From something deeper. Something harder to name. He stood slowly. Turning in place. Trying to understand. Trying to make sense of a moment he had not witnessed. And then, a sound. Behind him. Soft. Almost nothing. Like a foot pressing lightly into snow. He froze. Every muscle locked in place. The silence shifted. Just slightly. Enough to feel it. He didn't turn immediately. Because some instincts take time. And some fears demand confirmation. The sound came again. Closer now. A faint exhale. Not his own. Mikhail slowly began to turn his head. And stopped. It wasn't the sound that stopped him. It was the feeling that followed. A presence. Close enough to matter. But too quiet to understand. His breath slowed on its own, as if his body knew that any sudden movement would break something fragile or provoke something waiting. The forest remained still. But no longer empty. He finished the turn. Slowly. Carefully. Expecting something. A soldier. A civilian. Even an animal. But there was nothing. Only trees. Dark trunks rising into a pale sky. Only the clearing behind him, disturbed by footsteps that no longer made sense. And yet, he could still feel it. That same pressure from earlier. Only now it had direction. It was behind him. Watching. He kept his rifle raised, but lowered it slightly after a few seconds. The motion felt pointless. There was no target. No shape. Nothing to aim at. Just space. And silence that felt occupied. He took one step backward. The snow gave a soft crunch. Too loud. The sound lingered longer than it should have. He waited. The forest didn't react. Or maybe it did, just in a way he couldn't measure. He turned back toward the clearing. The scattered belongings suddenly looked different. Less like objects. More like evidence. A moment interrupted. Not by panic. But by something final. He walked slowly across the clearing now, scanning the ground with more attention. The footprints were deeper here. Some twisted. Some overlapping in tight circles. He noticed smaller ones. Children. Mixed among the larger tracks. All of them ending here. Not fading. Ending. He swallowed, his throat dry despite the cold. That didn't make sense. Tracks don't just stop. People don't just vanish. Even in war. Even in chaos. There's always direction. Always aftermath. But here, it was as if the movement had simply ceased. Like a thought cut off mid-sentence. He crouched again, this time closer to the center. His fingers brushed the ground. The snow was thinner here, almost melted at some point, then frozen again. There were marks beneath it. Not footprints. Something else. Irregular. Pressed into the earth. He leaned closer. Trying to make them out. Lines. Curves. Not random. But not natural either. His eyes narrowed. Trying to force meaning into shapes that resisted it. A pattern almost formed in his mind. And then slipped away. Like trying to read a word you've never seen before. He pulled his hand back. Slowly. A quiet unease settled deeper into his chest. This wasn't just abandonment. It wasn't retreat. And it wasn't battle. It was something he had no training for. Something no one had prepared him to recognize. A faint sound broke through his thoughts. Distant. Very distant. But real. He stood quickly, turning toward it. There. Far beyond the trees. A low hum. Almost mechanical. But uneven. Like something struggling to continue. His first instinct was hope. Machines meant people. People meant answers. Or at least, noise. He moved toward the sound without hesitation now. The rifle steadier in his hands. His steps faster, less cautious. The forest thickened as he went deeper. Branches brushed against his coat. Dry twigs snapped underfoot. Each sound echoing unnaturally far. As if the forest carried noise in strange ways. The hum grew slightly louder. Still distant. But clearer. It pulsed. On. Off. On again. Like a signal trying to survive. He pushed forward. Past trees that seemed to lean inward. Past shadows that shifted just enough to stay uncertain. His breathing grew heavier. Not from exhaustion. From anticipation. Because for the first time since the silence began, he was moving toward something. The trees finally began to thin. Light returned in pale streaks through the branches. And then, a structure. Half hidden. Low to the ground. Concrete. Cracked. Partially buried in snow and dirt. An old communications bunker. He recognized the shape immediately. Not from memory. From instinct. Every soldier learns to identify places like this. Places where messages are sent. Or lost. The door hung open. Just like the houses. That same quiet invitation. He approached slowly. The hum was coming from inside. Faint. But undeniable. He paused at the entrance. Listened. Nothing else. No voices. No movement. Only that broken, persistent signal. He stepped inside. The air was colder. Trapped. Heavy. The smell of metal and dust lingered faintly. His boots echoed softly against the concrete floor. Too softly. As if the space swallowed sound before it could travel. A single light flickered overhead. Weak. Unstable. Casting shadows that stretched and collapsed with each pulse. The room was small. Cramped. Equipment lined the walls. Most of it dead. Wires exposed. Panels broken. Except for one. At the far end. A radio unit. Still active. Barely. The source of the hum. He moved toward it. Each step cautious again. Drawn in. But alert. The signal crackled faintly now. Fragments of something. Not words. Not yet. Just noise trying to become meaning. He reached the table. Looked down. The device was old. Damaged. But functioning just enough to repeat whatever it had been given. Over. And over. And over. He adjusted the dial. Carefully. The sound sharpened. Static cleared just enough. And a voice emerged. Faint. Distorted. But human. He froze. Listening. The voice spoke slowly. Not rushed. Not panicked. Calm. Too calm. The words came through in broken fragments. Do not follow. A pause. Static surged. Then again. If you hear this. The signal cut briefly. Returned weaker. It listens. Mikhail's grip tightened on the edge of the table. The room felt smaller suddenly. The air thinner. The voice continued. Repeating. Looping. Like it had been trapped in the machine. We thought it was evacuation. Static swallowed the rest. Then one final fragment. Clearer than the others. It learns your voice. The signal collapsed into noise again. A long, empty hiss. Mikhail didn't move. His eyes fixed on the radio. His mind trying to process words that refused to settle into logic. Behind him. A sound. Not from the radio. Not from the forest. Inside the bunker. Soft. Close. A breath. And then. His own voice. Whispering. Right behind him. Calling his name. His name did not echo. It landed. Softly. Precisely. Exactly the way a human voice would say it, if they stood inches behind him. Mikhail did not turn. Not immediately. Because something inside him understood one simple truth. If he turned too fast, he might see it. And if he saw it, it would become real. The bunker felt smaller now. The flickering light above him stuttered once, twice. Then steadied. The radio continued its low hiss. It learns your voice. Over and over. As if it had never stopped. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Cold metal pressed into his skin. Grounding him. Keeping him here. The voice behind him came again. Quieter this time. Closer. Not just speaking his name now. Breathing it. Mikhail. The tone was almost right. Almost. But something beneath it felt hollow. Like a perfect copy missing a single piece no one could quite name. He swallowed. Slowly. His throat felt dry, tight. His training told him to move. To turn. To confront. But something older, deeper, told him to wait. To listen. Because whatever stood behind him was waiting too. Not attacking. Not rushing. Just observing. Learning. He shifted his weight slightly. Boots scraping against the floor. The sound seemed to stretch, bending unnaturally as it faded. The voice behind him stopped. Immediately. As if it had noticed the movement. As if it had learned something from it. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was focused. Mikhail slowly reached for the radio dial again. Not because he needed to hear it. But because he needed to do something. Something human. Something predictable. His fingers touched the metal. The signal sharpened again. Do not respond. The voice on the radio was clearer now. Stronger. It uses. Static cut the sentence in half. Then. The whisper behind him returned. This time faster. More confident. Mikhail. Closer. Right at his ear. The same tone. The same rhythm. Matching the cadence of his own thoughts. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. If it learns your voice, then it listens first. Copies second. Speaks last. A process. Not instinct. Not emotion. Something methodical. That meant it needed time. He exhaled slowly. Controlled. Careful not to let the breath shake. The whisper mimicked it. A fraction too late. That was the first mistake. Small. Almost nothing. But enough. Mikhail opened his eyes again. The room hadn't changed. Still the same flickering light. Same broken equipment. Same narrow exit behind him. But now he understood something new. He wasn't being hunted. Not yet. He was being studied. The realization settled heavily. Because it meant one thing. He still had a moment. A narrow one. But real. He spoke. For the first time since entering the forest. His voice low. Even. Deliberate. You're not them. The words felt strange in the air. Heavy. Like they didn't belong here. Behind him. Silence. Then. A response. Immediate. Too immediate. You're not them. Perfectly repeated. Same tone. Same pace. But empty. No intention behind it. Just imitation. Mikhail nodded slightly. As if confirming something to himself. It didn't understand meaning. Only sound. Only pattern. That gave him an edge. A small one. But enough to try. He moved suddenly. Not turning. Stepping forward. Away from the voice. Toward the wall beside the radio. The whisper reacted instantly. Following. But again. A fraction too slow. That delay mattered. He grabbed a loose piece of metal from the floor. A broken panel. Rough. Sharp at the edges. He held it tightly. Then threw it hard toward the far corner of the bunker. The object struck the wall with a loud, sharp clang. The sound exploded through the confined space. Echoing. Layering. Distorting. For a brief second. The whisper shifted. Pulled toward the noise. Repeating it. Trying to match it. Confused. Mikhail turned. Fast. Finally. The corner behind him was empty. But not entirely. The air itself seemed wrong. Like heat rising from invisible fire. A distortion. Faint. Barely visible. But there. Standing where the voice had been. Watching him. Or trying to. He didn't wait. He moved. Fast. Toward the exit. Boots striking the floor harder now. The sound loud. Clear. Human. The distortion followed. Not running. Sliding. Adjusting. Learning his movement in real time. He reached the doorway. Cold air rushed in. Sharp. Alive. He stepped outside. And didn't stop. The forest swallowed him again. Branches scraping against his coat. Snow breaking underfoot. His breath loud now. Uncontrolled. Behind him. Nothing. No footsteps. No pursuit. But he knew better. It didn't chase like a human. It didn't need to. It would follow differently. Patiently. Adapting. He pushed deeper into the trees. Not toward the village. Away from it. Away from everything that made sense. Because now, distance mattered less than unpredictability. The forest thickened again, shadows stretching longer as the light faded. The air felt heavier, colder, but real. That mattered. Reality had weight. Sound. Resistance. Things that thing struggled with. For now. He slowed slightly. Not stopping. Just enough to listen. Nothing. Only his own movement. His own breath. His own presence. Then, a voice ahead. Soft. Familiar. Calling his name. Mikhail froze. Every muscle locking instantly. Because this time, it wasn't behind him. It was in front. Deeper in the forest. Waiting. And it sounded better. Closer to real. Less hollow. He took a slow step back. The snow shifted quietly beneath him. The voice stopped. Then adjusted. Repeating the sound of his step. Perfectly. No delay. Mikhail's chest tightened. It was learning faster now. Too fast. The trees around him seemed to close in. The light fading further. The path, if there ever was one, gone completely. Only direction left. Only instinct. The voice came again. Not just his name this time. Words. Simple. Carefully formed. Stay here. The tone was almost human. Almost. But the spacing was wrong. Like someone assembling language piece by piece. He shook his head slightly. A reflex. Not an answer. And immediately, the voice copied that too. Not the words. The motion. Branches ahead shifted slightly. Not from wind. From something adjusting its position. Watching him react. Understanding. Mikhail's grip tightened on his rifle. But he didn't raise it. Because what do you aim at? When the target is still deciding what shape to take. The silence returned again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt active. Thinking. Evolving. And then, from somewhere deeper in the forest, dozens of voices. Faint. Layered. All speaking at once. Fragments of different tones. Different ages. Different people. All trying to form the same word. Mikhail. He stepped back again. And his heel caught on something beneath the snow. His balance shifted. Just slightly. Enough. To begin falling backward. He hit the snow hard, cold biting through every layer of his uniform. The voices didn't stop. They multiplied, overlapping, echoing, layering themselves into the forest. Not shouting. Not screaming. Just calling. Always calling. Mikhail. 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 He pressed his face into the snow. The ground smelled faintly of pine and wet earth, the only scent that felt real. His chest rose and fell, trying to find rhythm in the chaos around him. Above, the canopy shivered. Branches groaned as if the forest itself were alive, leaning closer, watching. Mikhail forced himself up onto one elbow. He looked around. The clearing ahead had vanished. The tracks, gone. Only shadows stretching like hands between the trees. The same shadows that had been there when he entered. Now they moved subtly. Not running, not approaching. Shifting. Responding. He realized something then. It wasn't the voices. Not exactly. It was him. Everything the voices said, everything that followed, every hesitation, every move he made, it shaped them. He was teaching them. Feeding them. The forest had become a mirror. The creatures, the thing, whatever it was, they didn't exist without his actions. And yet, they weren't entirely empty. They were learning faster than he could imagine. He rose slowly, every step calculated, trying to maintain some control. Then he saw them, or rather, him. A figure in the distance. A man. Or a copy of a man. His height, posture, even the angle of the rifle. But wrong. Imperfect. The head tilted slightly off-center. Movements too fluid, too deliberate, too aware. The snow muffled his approach, but the figure didn't need snow. It didn't need footsteps. It already knew. Mikhail froze. It raised a hand. Not threatening. Not inviting. A pause that lasted long enough to unbalance him again. Then it spoke. Not his name. Not a warning. A word. Why? Simple. Direct. Human. Mikhail's mind raced. He wanted to respond. Wanted to demand answers. But words failed him. Because how do you explain something that shouldn't exist? Something that learns you before you can define it? The figure moved forward. Each step precise. No sound, no leaves crushed, no snow shifted, yet the air changed. Pressure. Awareness. Attention focused solely on him. He tried to run. The forest resisted. Trees seemed closer, trunks thicker, paths narrowing impossibly. Every branch, every shadow, every whisper seemed to anticipate his motion. He stopped. Breath ragged. Hands tight on the rifle. And then he saw it clearly. There was no escape. Not really. Not because the forest or the figure could stop him. Because he had already taught them every choice he could make. Every hesitation. Every impulse. Every instinct. He looked down at his hands. Gloves caked in frost. Fingers gripping the rifle like a lifeline. He had led himself here. The figure stopped. Far enough to let him see its face. Not quite a face. But familiar. Human. His own. Only wrong. Hollowed out. A reflection of survival without hesitation, without doubt, without fear. Mikhail realized then, this wasn't just pursuit. It wasn't punishment. It was understanding. Observation. Judgment. And the forest held its breath. He could feel it. The trees leaning closer, listening, waiting for a choice. One choice remained. To act, or to stand still. He exhaled. The air burned in his lungs. And he stepped forward. Not to flee. Not to fight. But to confront. To acknowledge. Because the moment had come where hesitation was itself a surrender. The figure mirrored his motion instantly. Perfectly. Mikhail raised the rifle, not to shoot. Just to show intent. And the figure did the same. Time stretched. The forest waited. The wind whispered between branches. A crow cawed far above, breaking the spell briefly. And then the figure spoke again. A single word. Mikhail. This time, not a copy. A question. He lowered the rifle. Slowly. So did it. The forest exhaled, almost imperceptibly. The hum of the radio from the bunker drifted faintly on the wind. Not commanding. Not repeating. Just fading. Mikhail took another step. The figure mirrored him. And he realized the forest, the voices, the shadowed figure, it didn't seek to destroy him. It sought to reflect. To teach. To survive. He looked around one last time. The village remained empty. The tracks gone. Snow settled over every step, erasing history. And yet, he knew. Every choice, every hesitation, every breath he had taken, was recorded somewhere in the memory of this place. He exhaled again. Slowly. Purposefully. For the first time in days, he felt the weight of solitude shift. Not lifted. Not gone. But different. He started walking. Not toward the village. Not away. Just forward. The figure followed. Always mirrored, always learning, always present. Mikhail accepted it. Because in war, in isolation, in the face of impossible things, sometimes survival isn't measured in victory. It is measured in persistence. In the understanding that even in silence, even in fear, even when confronted by the unexplainable, life continues. The forest seemed to recede slightly. Not yielding, but making room. Shadows no longer pressed in. The wind returned. Cold air, sharp and real, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet earth. And for the first time, Mikhail whispered, not to the forest, not to the figure, but to himself. Forward. A small, defiant word. The figure mirrored it, and for a fleeting moment, it felt human. Step by step, they moved together through the trees. Toward what, he did not know. Toward survival. Toward understanding. Toward whatever came next. The war had not ended. The village remained empty. The forest was full of memory. But he was still walking. And that, in itself, was enough. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to help us remember and share stories from the front lines. Stories from the past help us understand humanity in difficult times. Share your thoughts in the comments, every memory matters.